Jon Gunn. It is a pleasure to talk to you about season two, House of David, coming to Prime Video on Friday, March 27th. I will let you in on one little secret.
Oh,
All
good.
right.
I like secrets.
It-
Right in the beginning.
all right. So I live near Calvary Chapel. Not the biggest fan of their theology, yet you made me love Jesus Revolution. So congratulations on that. You know,
Thank you.
and American Underdog.
Can I
You've
tell
worked
you
on so
something
many.
about that, by the way? Like
Please
when
go
I was
ahead.
writing Jesus Revolution, and I grew up in the 70s. My dad was a preacher in Southern California. And my like my thesis statement in writing that movie was love one another.
Mhm.
Like it was like a great look back at a moment in time where the church embraced everybody and everyone loved one another. And so I'm glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, I come from an Eastern Orthodox background, so our theologies do not match up with Calvary Chapel. And the stuff that I learned, I was just like, okay. And poor Frisbee, his situation, but John
Yes.
Rumi did a great job. But here we are talking season two of House of David. What surprises are we in for? Because if you can make me like a movie about them, you can make me like anything.
Season two is season one on steroids. It's a big step up just in scope and scale. And I will say that I love this season so much. And it was really compelling the journey of like in season one, taking David from shepherd to slaying Goliath. But then picking up in season two exactly where we left off. I mean, we pick up the moment he slays Goliath. And the very next question that's so interesting is how on earth is David, who is not a warrior, has no formal fighting training, going to survive the battlefield that followed the moment he slayed Goliath when 200,000 soldiers came crashing in on him from both sides. And so that spoke to the theme in many ways of the season, which was the cost of David's destiny and the challenge he's going to be faced with to rise from being a shepherd to working his way towards becoming a king. And so this is an interesting moment in time in history because season two is right at the dawn of the Iron Age, and so it's a season of transformation. The sword of Goliath is an early sword made of iron, and that's a new weapon and a new technology that will transform the world. And David is also a weapon that will transform the world. And so this is a season of transformation and a season that really explores the cost of destiny.
Well, the interesting thing with this, and you're pointing out that going from bronze to iron, we are in that transitional stage of going from the Industrial Revolution to, the tech revolution to now the AI revolution. We're in that weird state of, well, almost panic in that transition of how do we incorporate this new system into what already existed, or is the old world completely erased? And here we are moving forward, in the 21st century.
And it's really cool that you bring that up because, when I'm telling stories, I'm always trying to find like what is the purpose for telling this story right now? What is the way in to making it relevant to a modern audience? And you're absolutely right. It feels very charming and simplistic to think that like the shift from bronze to iron was like transformative, but it absolutely changed the world. And for those that had the technology of iron, you were going to be hard pressed to defend yourself against that. And the Israelites didn't have metal technologies that were nearly as good as the Philistines. So that's why it was so incredible that a shepherd boy on the Israelite side of this battlefield would defeat a giant, and then that army would use the momentum of that to defeat the other army. And to watch the world evolve around a shift like that is something that we can all feel the way you just described.
With something like this, there has to be poetic licensing. I mean, when you read ancient texts, whether you're reading the Epic of Gilgamesh or the Holy Bible or various other religious texts from that time period, it's not overly detailed in everything. God did, this is what happened, and it's very straight to the point. How are you allowed to play with historical context within theology to turn it into a narrative that not necessarily is preachy, but also wanting to honor the text without, distorting it?
Yeah, that's the great challenge and ambition of what we do when we tell these stories. And you said it exactly right. What's interesting is that the Bible gives you key points and sometimes very little details in between, and sometimes a tremendous amount of detail about something very small, like how many cubits the ark was, the measurements of the tabernacle or something. And so the the challenge, but also the gift of this is this sort of emotional archaeology, of like connecting the key events that are described with specificity and filling in between of like how might, this is where your imagination and storytelling sort of plays, while staying true to the intention of the source material to the best that we can. Then imagining what would it be like to live in that moment? How might a character get from this thing that was described to this thing that was described? What is the relatable human experience that gets a person through commitment, love, jealousy, betrayal, frustration? Like, what are the emotions that these characters might have been feeling that get them through from this action to this action? And with David, he's such an emotional character. I mean, the Psalms are just filled with his laments and joys and failings. And so we do have a lot of sense of like the warrior poet that is the heart of David. And that's the core of the show. And we kind of build from there. But we're always staying as true as we can to the key moments of the Bible that we know are the sort of tent poles. And then in between there is where the work is and the fun of exploration.
It's also going to be interesting to see how going from shepherd boy to giant slayer to king eventually, and then the situation with Uriah. And if this is a spoiler for you, you've had 5,000 years to read the book, so that's your fault. All right.
That's true.
Yeah. So when we get to the situation with Uriah, how do we progress all these various aspects from adolescent to kingship?
Well, it's a great question, because part of the great exploration of the show is that shepherd to king is not a straight line, and it's not an easy path. And from history, we can look back and say, oh, he was destined to be the king. So once he found out he was going to be king, that's great news, and now he's got this wonderful path ahead of him. But the truth of it is that that path is filled with so much uncertainty. And going from shepherd to warrior, which is what happens in season 2, and eventually from warrior to king, also comes with the realization that character flaws, mistakes, compromises, great regrets are part of that journey as well. And one of the things that made David so special is that he was very open about lamenting those regrets and confessing his sins and sort of owning them. In fact, he wrote about them in great detail and shared them with the world in the Psalms. And so he's a flawed man and makes a lot of mistakes, but we embrace those as well as part of his journey in the story.
With something like this, it has to be a little more difficult. Like, let's take The Chosen, for example. That's an easier shoot in a sense of the cast is smaller and you don't have to worry about this epic battle that's happening.
Yeah.
When you have to create a literal war in a battlefield with 200,000 soldiers going at it, I mean, how do you sit there and reconcile how far, CG is going to be involved? How many extras are we going to have? What's going to be in there? How do we tell a story with this? How do we make it realistic to the time period where soldiers aren't throwing Superman punches and doing arm bars like we've seen in certain things? Like, how do you keep it true to the era?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we do a lot of research on this, and we make a lot of these decisions when we're casting actors and working with our stunt choreographers and our horse team. Is like, we want to first look back and make it as realistic as we can, or understand what the real battle would be like. And by the way, these are not trained soldiers. These are not these are not elite, Marines and Navy SEALs. A lot of times these battles were fought by just farmers and local villagers who grabbed whatever weapons they could, sometimes swords, but sometimes farming tools, and so we wanted it to be rough and we wanted it to feel authentically messy, but the scope and scale of it was massive. And so we would start with like our best understanding of how these things really happen, and then we would from that figure out the most cinematic way to do it, always centering on the character story. So this battle was largely about, what is it like for David being an inexperienced warrior on the battlefield where he just slayed Goliath and now has to escape with his life? How difficult was it for these his brothers and his fellow soldiers to find each other on the battlefield, just to even find each other, when there's such a, and then we really played a lot with like the confusion and chaos of the dust being kicked up and not being able to see, and just trying to survive moment to moment. So we tell the stories, the small stories and the big stories, on the battlefield, and we make sure that every part of the battle is progressing that story. That's where it starts.
With a shoot like this, I mean, you literally can't shoot on location where this took place. What substitutes for the battlefield? What substitutes for ancient Jerusalem and Israel and Bethlehem and Judea in this regard?
In our case, Greece, Athens, Greece, in and around, which is cool because we shot at castles in Corinth, which is very, very biblical as well, for the Corinthians. But it was great because we cast so many Israeli actors, and a number of people were there saying, this feels like Israel. So we found locations as best we could that are there similar kind of a terrain to what it would have been like in ancient Israel. And then you just go with things that are really beautiful and have great scope, and the challenges of the land, and the specificity of the land is a big part of what the story is about. So we really wanted to get that right, and Greece ended up being an absolutely beautiful place to shoot.
And the fact that the bishop that's seated in Corinth is on the throne of St. Paul, who founded the church there. I mean,
Interesting, right?
yeah. I mean, it's like I heard some preachers say, "Oh yeah, all the churches Paul founded are no longer there." I'm like, no, they're all there. All the footstools are there, and the bishop is still in his seat. So it's amazing to see like how ill-informed
And
some
and
people are.
and that history is it's a great part of like what infuses the show with real spirit and truth.
When you do a passion project like this, how do you avoid your own theology from your own tradition, with your father being a preacher, going into it and trying to stay as historically accurate to the time period without, like, well, the evangelical church said this, the Catholic church said that, the Lutherans say this, the Presbyterians say this,
Yeah.
Reform Judaism says this, Orthodox Judaism says this, Hasidic Judaism says it, like,
Yeah, I mean, the truth is everything you're describing makes it impossible to do it the right way, meaning that like there's always going to be somebody that might have a different opinion, but we take in voices. We have a biblical council, we bring in consultants, historical consultants, biblical consultants from various faiths. And so we try to pull in as much truth as we can, and then beyond that, it becomes about authenticity and the spirit and the heart of our intention. We want to do this story justice. We want to tell it as sort of accurately as we can in a way that's very entertaining, but that but stays true to the biblical source material. And so we kind of pull in all of that, and you have to just make judgment calls at some point where, even literally when it comes to like the accents, how would someone pronounce this word versus this word? We get a lot of different points of view on that. And then you have to just settle on something that we think will be the most relatable, watchable version for a modern audience that has as much authenticity as possible.
are there moments where you sit back and you see the shot on the let's use the old term, on the dailies,
Yeah.
and here's the battle scene, and then all of a sudden we pull back, here's the panoramic view, and then here's the tight shot and the close up and the final edit, and it's that punching in the air, we got it, this is even better than what I had pictured in my mind's eye.
Mhm. That's what you hope for. And I will say that season 2 has been a lot of that for me. So many key moments, and not even just the big scale stuff, like the battles are definitely part of it, is like huge battle moments that I feel so happy about because we really captured something. Watching David slay Goliath in season 1 was one of those for me. But also just along the way, like key biblical moments, a confrontation between Jonathan and his father Saul, where Saul throws a spear at him, right? Or Jonathan and David's relationship as brothers, and when they have to say goodbye tearfully to each other. These are moments that are so well known from scripture that when we were shooting them on the day and then watching the footage of it, I felt like, wow, I really think that's even better than I imagined it would be in its sort of truth and authenticity.
Yeah, there are moments when we have to realize, we're 3,500 years removed from this.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was in graduate school, since I'll give you a personal anecdote, a professor of mine had said he can't wait to meet Christ and to look down on him. People thought it as like the derogatory look down on him. And my professor was this Polish man that was 6'2", and he's like, no, 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 no. And they're like, but Christ was tall for his era. I was like, yeah, but tall for his era was like 5'8", 5'9", where
Right.
everybody else's average height was like 5'4". you know,
Yeah.
and taking that into consideration, realizing those contexts and putting it in there, how exciting is it for you that, like, yes, we have the poetic licensing, yes, not the average height of human beings is 5'4" anymore, but to see what it looks like on camera for you and what you want to convey to that general audience. And I'll leave that with you because I got the 1 minute warning of
Yeah.
what would you like the general audience to get from this as well, and not just focus on the historical context, but the narrative itself.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you want people to be deeply moved by it. I think David's story in many ways is the origin of the hero's journey story, but also is a character who's seeking his own destiny and his own purpose in life and realizing that it's a difficult fight to earn your own destiny. And so that's the heart and soul of what I want people to take from it. Beyond that, it's also really gratifying when people just love the adventure. And speaking of height, I mean, Goliath is 11 feet tall in our show. We really pushed that. Saul was like 6'2" and was a head taller than any other man. So like those details are fun to play with, but what's important is the heart and the soul and the authenticity of it. And that's where I feel like the show really delivers.
Well, Jon Gunn, thank you so much for your time today talking to me about House of David. I can talk to you about this all day. This comes out Friday the 27th of March, 2 days before Palm Sunday, just in time for Easter. So congratulations on this. Congratulations on everything else that's going on for you. Can't wait to talk to you for season 3.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.